Welcome to Woodland Hills Library. Most of you are students, but we also have Shaler here today and Franklin Regional, who made a trip out to hear Colum McCann speak. So I'd like to introduce Josh Rollerson, who is the host of Morning Edition on 90.5 WUSA, and he's going to be our MC and interviewer for today. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. And it's my honor to introduce somebody who probably doesn't need an introduction, judging by the conversation we've just had in this room over the last 10 or 15 minutes. But Colum McCann is the author of the National Book Award-winning Let the Great World Spin, which I know some of you are great fans of, and most recently of Transatlantic, which is the Allegheny County Community Library Association One Book, One Community selection for this year. And I think most of us have now read it, and we will be talking about it, but please welcome Colum McCann. And glad I have the opportunity to ask the first question. Colum, so much of this book is about the idea that events in history kind of reverberate through time, and right. Things have a way of coming back around. So given that, this may be kind of an odd question, but what was the origin? What was the genesis of the story? Is there an idea that you began with that went from there?
Sure. Firstly, I'd like to say it's such a pleasure to hang out with all you guys and all the schools that are watching virtually as well. I think that's a fantastic project, and so kudos to everybody who organises this. This is a very special moment to be involved in. So well done, and thank you for inviting me. So the impetus for Transatlantic was the story of Frederick Douglass. I was amazed that Douglass went to Ireland, first of all. It wasn't really well known in Ireland at all, and it's sort of been forgotten in the history books. And that he was 27 years old. We sort of see Frederick Douglass, because the icons of him, he's older, he's got that great head of grey hair and so on. But he was a young man when he went to Ireland, and he was still a slave. And this was astounding to me, that a young slave would go to Ireland, having already written a narrative of the life of a slave, and see what was unfolding in my country. And what was unfolding at his feet was one of the terrible moments in Irish history, which is known as the Great Hunger or the Great Famine. And I was just astounded by that and wanted to try and negotiate that as an idea. But I wanted to bring it all the way up to the present day, because my feeling is that everything we do and everything we are is informed by everything that we have. Excuse me, by everything that we have been. So, and everywhere where we are now is influenced by everywhere that we have been. And I was telling the students a little bit earlier that part of my growing up, part of my process was that I traveled around the United States on a bicycle, and I got to meet an awful lot of people when I did so. And that helped me understand a lot of things, not only about myself, but about the world in general, and about the idea of storytelling. So, and I'm kind of fascinated by the world. I like the world. I know that sounds like a silly thing to say, but certain people and certain writers, they like to hide away from the world. I like to engage with it as much as I possibly can. The French writer Émile Zola says that you should live your life out loud. So I think hopefully all of you guys will live your lives out loud.
It was interesting to hear you talk about your bicycle trip and the kindness that people showed you on that trip, because it seems to me that's an important device in the novel. You keep having instances where just sort of random strangers show empathy for someone, and it drives the plot in an important way.
Yeah.
Is that something you've experienced throughout your life, or was that kind of your bicycle trip? Was that a first encounter with that?
The bicycle trip was, well, I've done a lot of things. I walked across Ireland a few times, and I experienced kindness there. Bicycle trip. I wrote a book called This Side of Brightness in the 1990s, where I sort of stayed. I didn't live with the homeless people in the subway tunnels of New York, but I stayed with them. Excuse me. Frog in my throat. And I got to know them. And one of the things about the homeless people in the subway tunnels, no matter how tough a life that they'd lived, they were living in, little shacks that they'd built off to the side of the tunnels, and cardboard boxes and things like this, and very, very tough lives. And some of them had been Vietnam vets, and some of them had been former football players from the University of Alabama. People had these lives before. But the vast common denominator with all these people, when I talk with them, they would say, when I get out of here. Not if I get out of here. There was always the feeling that there was some sort of available optimism. And it seems to me that is one of the things that we don't talk enough about. And my project, I suppose, is to say the world is a tough place, yes, and I'm willing to go there, and I'm willing to go underground and be with the homeless people, or to talk about war, or to talk about difficult things. But it's not good enough only to talk about difficult things. It's not good enough to be a cynic. Cynics are boring to me. Cynics they're not very muscular. They're not very agile. They're very rigid. And in fact, I find them to be a little bit sentimental. They like to say that the optimists, and I would call myself an optimist, sometimes a bit of a pez optimist. But I think that the optimists are actually stronger, because especially if you're a realist and an optimist at the same time.
Do you worry at all that our sort of global supply of optimism is beginning to run short at all, either in the world at large or maybe in the literary world?
Always. I always worry about that. But the fact of the matter is that, yes, the world is in danger at several different times. Like Let the Great World Spin is really a novel about 9/11. It's an allegory about 9/11. But it says in the end, we stumble on. No matter how tough, rough the world, or brutal the world happens to be, the fact of the matter is that you must go on. Because if you don't go on, that's it, finished, and you sort of pull out. And I think it's so. Therefore, I think it's easier for certain people, politicians, writers, artists, to be quiescent and not get socially engaged in the world, and just say, oh, it's rough, it's bad. But I think I'm not saying that everybody has to feel this way, but personally, I like to think that there's a meaning behind all of this. I'm not getting religious or anything like that, but I do think that our lives must have some sort of significance, whatever that happens to be. And often you find it in the most anonymous corners, like say downtown Pittsburgh. I bet you there's some people down there working with homeless people, or working with organizations for people who don't have as much as what we have to have. They're the heroes for me. That you find them in the small little anonymous corners.
So kind of two modes of research, I would think, inform what you do, and one of them is clearly spending time in the world and talking to people and hearing their stories. The other one is very much the traditional mode of research. I'm guessing you've spent a lot of time in libraries, a lot of time with books, to get inside the head of someone like Frederick Douglass and the other historical figures. Can you talk about that process a little?
Sure. I actually I still go to the libraries. I mean, I'm a big fan of libraries and librarians. I've actually dedicated a book of mine solely to librarians a few years ago, because they've helped me so much. And you go into a library, it's actually deeper than Google. I mean, some people think that everything's available on Google, but no, there's still things that are not there yet on Google. And also, I love going into a library and just sitting down and having all those books sort of available to you. And so there's a lot of research. So, for example, when I did Let the Great World Spin, there's a section in it, and we talked a little bit about the students. There's one section which is a portrait of a prostitute on the streets in 1974. So the research that I had to do for that was, there was lots of different research. Don't laugh, okay? I won't tell you. There was lots of different forms of research. But primarily it was watching films from the early 1970s, reading books from the early 1970s, looking at photographs, then going to the library and trying to find histories, oral histories of people who'd been on the streets. Then I went out with cops in the Bronx And then they introduced me to older cops who'd been around on the streets in the 1970s. Those older cops brought me to a warehouse that was full of rap sheets. And I went in and checked out all these rap sheets and found portraits alternative portraits of women who were on the streets. There you'd find their nicknames, for instance, like Giggles would be a great name, Sunshine or Sweet Cakes, and all these things. And so I become like a magpie, right? I pick from here and I pick from there and eventually I build a nest. And so you build a nest out of various different experiences, and you try to portray a world that is not yours. But to me, that's the interesting part of it, because I wake up in the morning and I don't want to be me. I want to be someone else, right? I love the fact that I could be someone else, whether it be, a monk, whether it be a wealthy woman living in a penthouse on Park Avenue. Getting into the head of Frederick Douglass, or the mind and the body of Frederick Douglass was a fascinating thing.
Who knew he was a bodybuilder?
Yeah, well, that was the thing. I mean, I was amazed because I went down to his house and in Washington, D.C., which is now a museum. If you ever get a chance to go there, please go there. Because Frederick Douglass is one of our great, really one of the fathers of our nation, one of the fathers of where we happen to be now. He's so important to Obama, so important to Martin Luther King, so important to so many figures in U.S. and global history. But go to the museum, and in his bedroom there, you'll see 2 barbells. And I thought that was fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Now, to be honest with you, I don't know if he took those barbells to Ireland or not. In fact, he probably didn't. So I created a little bit of a lie in the text where I have him carrying these barbells around and working out and stuff like that. But I think it's a true lie, if you will, because it was important for me to create a body that was there that people could be in, and the space that Frederick Douglass inhabited. And also, he was a black man in Ireland in 1845. He had to be acutely aware of who he was and how he was. And in fact, all the Victorian women in Dublin, they all fell for Frederick Douglass. They all wanted to have a picnic with him, and along the banks of the Liffey. So for me to go in, so I had to read a lot about Douglass. I had to read his work. I had to read a lot of history in and around it, and eventually build up a portrait of him. But it's fun. Yeah. To me, the research is fun.
Well, and this also kind of gets at one of the really interesting things to me about Transatlantic was the way it combines fiction, just straight fiction, with these historical accounts. And thinking about what you were saying earlier about how the aims of literature and journalism and history are all kind of the same in a sense. Do you think of this novel or your work more generally as a sort of a journalistic enterprise?
I think of my work as a hybrid. I don't think that the poets are better than the fiction writers. I don't think the fiction writers are better than the journalists. I don't think the journalists are better than the artists. No. All of these art forms are privileged towards one particular place, and that's the examination of what it means to be human and to be alive in the world right now. And so, therefore, a piece of journalism can be just as powerful as a piece of as a poem. And so, for me, I think I'm sort of a hybrid between all those things. I'm really interested in poetry. I wish I could write good poetry. I can't. I'm really interested in journalism. I was a journalist for many years. I still think I probably am. But primarily, I'm a fiction writer. But I don't really know what the word fiction means. Isn't that weird? Like, here I am, I'm a fiction writer. I still don't really know what it means. Because I think that the real can be invented, and the invented is actually real. What do I mean by that? Well, the real being invented, my crack is that all you have to do to know that the real is invented is watch Fox 5 News. Right? And they're inventing things left, right, and centre. But to be more serious, how can the invented be real? Well, think of it this way. What do you think about when you think about the Great Depression? How did you guys get to understand the Great Depression in the U.S.? Steinbeck. Thank you. Steinbeck, Grapes of Wrath, right? So John Steinbeck wrote a novel, invented a story, invented a character, Tom Joad, right? And invented a story that is now representative of hundreds of thousands of real lives. But that was invented. But it is real in our imagination, and it's real in our perception of what the Great Depression happens to be. And so this is something that I think will increasingly become important down through the years when they study the brain and they study brain science. We tend to think of our imagination as not being part of us, as not being sort of real. We think of it as ephemeral, as sort of out there. But in fact, the fact of the matter is that our imagination is absolutely a real and concrete thing. And I think if the human body, the human mind, the human psyche is going to change dramatically, say, over the next 100 years, one of the things that it's going to change towards, and I know you're interested in science fiction because we were talking about that, is the fact that our thoughts and our desires and our imaginary escapades will actually be considered real commodities, real things.
You mentioned poetry a few moments ago, and I was reading through the press materials for this event. I was struck by a comment you made about Walt Whitman, or thinking about your project as a Whitmanian. It struck me because I don't remember any reference to Walt in the text. Maybe I missed it, but no. But he was very much on my mind as I was reading, and specifically the way that Whitman will kind of like talk to the future, to this reader hundreds of years hence, that that he addresses specifically,
right.
And it always struck me in this very real way, and that was exactly the feeling I was getting, particularly in the Douglas sections, the Alcock and Brown sections. There was this like direct channel of communication to the past that was sort of electrifying. And I don't know if that's what you had specifically in mind with Whitman. I guess I have some other thoughts of what you might have been getting at with that, but I wonder if you have a favorite Walt Whitman poem or favorite.
Oh yeah, I mean, what's the Whitman line about every atom belonging to me as good as belongs to you? And I also love the Whitman line. He says, "Do I contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict myself," which is wonderful. Listen, one of the things that's wrong about our school system, about our education, and about ourselves in general, is that we all want one answer, and that's wrong. There's always more than one answer. Well, part of what we should be able and available to do is recognize the fact that there's at least a couple of truths that are going on with most situations. You take any sort of political situation, like say even the Ukraine right now this morning. Certain people have a perception of what is right. If we can try to understand all the various different points of view, we'd be much better off, and we'd be able to sort of negotiate peace without maybe bloodshed. That's a big thing to think, but I think part of what's wrong with, say, the Irish education system, the US education system, is it's all funneled down to as if there's one particular truth. Whitman would have told you that there are many, many, many sort of truths, and that's part of the beauty of the world. Do you guys get a chance to read any Walt Whitman bits and pieces? Yeah, great, good. If you get a chance, continue to read it. I envy you guys right now because you're all discovering books, which is great, and you'll continue to discover them probably now for the rest of your life.
How are we doing on time? Should we go to some student questions? I have lots more, but shall we? Okay. Ms. Jones. Have a seat.
Hello. So earlier you were talking about how you like to wake up in the morning and pretend to be someone else. You don't want to be yourself. Well, whenever you were saying that, I couldn't help but think about Corrigan and his brother. And I was just interested in really seeing how much of you portray in the Irish Brothers and Let the Great World Spin.
It's a good question because, the characters that I write about tend to be sort of far away from my life, I grew up in suburban Dublin, and I didn't grow up like Corrigan at all. If anything, I'd be closer to Corrigan's brother, like a little bit cynical, a little bit on the edge. I would like to be somebody like Corrigan, and I suppose that's what you do when you write books, is that you write about what you would you'd like to be, but they all become sort of autobiographical in a way. Because I tell people, especially students, that the prevailing wisdom is that you should write about what you know about. But I tell them you should write about what you don't know about, which is kind of crazy, right? But if you write towards what you don't know, you will discover things about yourself that you weren't fully aware of. Are you a writer?
Hopefully.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Fantastic.
I'm working on it.
Yeah. Asking good questions.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
How many aspiring writers do we have in the room, just out of curiosity? Okay.
Good. Hi, how are you? What's your name?
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, hi.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I wondered what made you decide which characters to write in first person, which to write in third person.
That's a writer's question, right? You're a writer. No. Wow. That sounds like a real writer's question. Which characters to do in third? That's a tough question to answer because it's basically like being a musician, right? It's like choosing which instrument you're going to use next. Are you going to use a saxophone, or are you going to use a guitar? Are you going to sing on this? Or are you going to allow the music to play in the background? I often think of like say Van Morrison, or any band you can think of, Coldplay. How do they determine what their music is going to be? It's basically they feel it out, right? It's something that's like a gut instinct. So you look for the music in any way that you can. So sometimes a voice speaks to me. I know that sounds sort of weird and mystical, but it sort of speaks to me in the first person. And other times it speaks to me in the third person. And sometimes, as in Let the Great World Spin, this character Claire, you're in both the third person and the first person at once. And that's a technically difficult thing to do as a writer, but a good thing if you can pull it off. But so my answer is really I don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Come on up.
Hi there.
Oh, hey.
How are you?
Good to meet you.
Good to meet you.
I'm Jacob Burke.
Hi, Jacob.
I'm a senior, and I was wondering, we had read a basket full of wallpapers in our AP English class, and I was wondering why Osobe, is that how you pronounce his name?
Yeah, Osobe.
Why you portrayed him to put up wallpaper in people's houses? Like, you could have picked anything, and you chose wallpaper. Is it kind of a way of he was able to calm himself through wallpaper, or was he closing himself in from the world? I'm just wondering.
Actually, both. And so this is an older story of mine that's written about 25 years ago. It's called A Basket Full of Wallpaper, and it's about a Japanese man who comes to the west of Ireland, and rumours start to surround him. And his art is that he puts up wallpaper in people's houses, but then he starts to wallpaper himself in. I won't tell you the end of the story, but technically, it's both things. First of all, he likes the art of wallpaper. It is quite a Japanese thing because they're very interested in the art of paper and origami and so on. And then the other thing is that the rumors surround him that he comes from, that he experienced Hiroshima. And it's a way for him to wall himself in. Where did it come from? I don't know. I lived in Japan for a while.
Okay.
So for about 18 months I lived in Japan, and that was a good experience. And I met a man called Mr. Tani in a hostel where my wife and I were staying, and I sort of modelled the character on this guy, Mr. Tani. But Lord knows, again, where the story comes. One of the things that's interesting about being a writer is sometimes you just don't know what it is that you're saying, but somebody comes along later and makes sense of it in your AP English class. You make sense of it for me, and I think that's a good thing. You know, I love the fact that you can present a story, and then it can be interpreted and reinterpreted by people as time goes on. So if you come up with a good solution for me, I'd be dying to know, and then I could tell people what the story's about. Thank you.
Also, I've seen you on Steve Colbert, the
right.
Colbert Report, actually, and you had said that you enjoy writing within your closet,
right?
Because it keeps you. It kind of is a way to focus And I guess if you could kind of readdress that topic, and do you still do that to this day?
Yeah, I have a cupboard at home. I was building a desk, and and it just so happened that there was a cupboard there, and I built the desk into the cupboard, and now it's become my favorite place to write. So my kids laugh at me and say, "Dad, you're going into the closet again," you know. And that came up. I have to tell you that I have a 17-year-old as well, and you know, the most popular I've ever been at home was the week that we were going to the Colbert Report. I was like, "Dad, I can't." So she got to come along. So sat in the audience, met Stephen Colbert. He's a really nice man,
Mm-hmm.
and she got all the swag as well, armbands and all that stuff. So that was one of the times when I was cool at home.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Are there other questions in the room?
There we go.
Come on. Have a seat.
Hi there.
Hi.
What's your name?
I'm Kylie.
Kylie.
Spitzkoyan.
And she was born February 28th. Same birthday. We were talking earlier.
But I was just wondering, in Transatlantic, which I really thought was an amazing book, like I said earlier, it taught me a lot about things that I'd never heard of before, such as the transatlantic flight,
Right.
the troubles, just all of that. I was wondering, there is a really close mother-daughter relationship throughout the whole book with the
Right.
fictional characters.
Right.
Was that based on something real in your life, or was that something you based on people that you met? How did you relate to those characters?
It's a good question. For whatever reason, I find it almost easier to write about women than I do about men. I don't know why that is, and I definitely don't want to talk to any psychologist about it, because I fear what I will find about myself. But I do think, and I'm going to make myself very unpopular with all the lads here, but that women have a sort of deeper emotional wardrobe than men do. So that as fictional characters, they're quite interesting to sort of explore and figure it out. Although this book, Transatlantic, started with the portraits of like three men, it's really the women that hold the book together. And I came from a family. I had two sisters. My older sister in particular had a very strong personality, and she used to take me out and about when I was a kid. My mum was from a farm in Derry, and I don't know. I think I had some strong figures in my own life that were important to me. So maybe there's an answer there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then also, just really
Sure.
quickly, you said that we were kind of exploring books at our age. Do you have any suggestions for good books to read?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, we're talking a little bit about Walt Whitman. When I was 17, I was reading Jack Kerouac. I was reading Richard Brautigan. I was reading the beat writers, Tom Wolfe, and that sort of thing. I should have been reading James Joyce and Sam Beckett, but I didn't get to them till later because I was Irish. Sometimes when it was something was right there and right beside you, you don't really appreciate it. I appreciate it later in later years. Amongst my favorites right now, I really like Michael Ondaatje. I like Peter Carey. I like Toni Morrison, Louise Erdrich. There's young writers that I like. Edwige Danticat, for instance. I'm sure some of you have heard about her. And there's so many. It's embarrassing sometimes to name writers, because then I think I should have named so and so. John Ray, people like that. I'm involved with an organisation called Narrative 4, which is we'll talk a bit about it, I think, before the day ends. But one of my vice president, I'm president of the organisation. The vice president is Ishmael Bea. Do you know Ishmael? You guys know that he was a child soldier in Africa, and he wrote an incredible book about his experiences. He's just written a new book called Radiance of Tomorrow, a fantastic piece of fiction. He's a very, very interesting writer too. But all books, any books, just go for. Just make sure they're good. That's hard to do, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just, before we take the next question, I just want to maybe give the remote sites an opportunity in case anybody there has been waiting, and also just to mention that anybody that isn't able to talk into a camera and a microphone, tweet their questions with the hashtag #ColumnLive, and we'll try to get your question to Column. Before we take one more from Woodland Hills, is there anybody at, I think I see Fox Chapel there. Hey guys.
Hello.
Anybody there?
This system is so fantastic. Oh, there's somebody coming up, I think. Yeah, look at that.
Hi, yeah. Can you hear me? I'm at Fox Chapel.
Hi. Yes.
Hi. Great. We do have a student with a question. Hi. Thanks for speaking with us. When did you know that you wanted to be a writer? And who inspired you?
Well, I'll tell you a story. My dad was a journalist, but when I was 9 years old, he was out in his writing shed. And I didn't know what he was doing, but he came to me with a big roll of paper, and he asked me to read what he was writing. And actually, he had written a children's soccer book. And about a year later, this book got published. And I was in school, and my teacher in school read it aloud every Friday. And all the kids reacted to it, and like they screamed and shouted when Georgie scored a goal and stuff like that. And I thought that was pretty amazing. That in my dad's writing shed, he created this thing out of thin air, and suddenly now it was a book. And suddenly also my friends, kids in class, were jumping up and down on the desks because this imaginary character had scored a goal. And I thought, there's a weird, fantastic power in that, but it's also, something that sort of changes the world in a way. So I don't know if I was conscious at that stage that I wanted to be a writer, but I think that was one of the moments that unconsciously, or subconsciously rather, taught me about writing.
Thanks for the question, Fox.
Thank you for the question, yeah. It's such a great system. Well done.
And don't hesitate to chime in if there are more questions, but I know we have several other people waiting here in Woodland Hills. Who else wanted to ask a question?
Hi.
Hi.
What's your name?
Carson.
Carson, hi.
When you wrote A Basket Full of Wallpaper, a lot of people talked about his background, but you never cleared it. Like, you never gave an answer, and why was that? Did you have one, in your own mind, but did you want to leave it up to people who were reading it?
You are absolutely 100% right. I want to leave it up to people who are reading it. I do have one in my own mind, but the one in my own mind is completely uninteresting to me. Really, honestly, I'm not. The one that is in your mind as a reader is the one that fascinates me. So I want, basically, with all my books, I try to leave certain things open so that the reader herself or himself can actually finish them. So in a weird way, they vicariously become an author. So that I'm not the only author, but the person who reads the book becomes an author in themselves. Because I think that we get told too much. It's kind of like we were talking about earlier on. Like, corporations tell us what to think. Corporations tell us what to drink, what to eat, what to buy, and all these things. Politicians tend to do the same thing. The best thing that an artist can do is not tell us what to think, but allow us to think something for ourselves and to discover it for ourselves. And there is a power in that. And this is part of the power dynamic as well. This is where art can actually become political, by leaving things open to the person who's reading or being involved.
Do you mind sharing with what you came up with for his character? Because I'm interested.
You tell me what you think.
I think he had a rather normal background.
Exactly.
And people just made it a lot worse.
Yeah. My feeling about this character was that he was not in Hiroshima. That he was not, he did have some difficulty. I mean, he was obviously he left something behind, but they never got to figure out exactly what it was, and part of it was the exaggeration, other people's perception of him, stereotypical perception of him, sort of forced him into a small box. But that's what I often do in literature. So you got it. That's good. That's
Thank
good.
you very much.
Thank you. I think we have one over here. Is that right?
We've got one over here and one on Twitter.
Okay. I don't do Twitter. I've never. Should I tweet really? Yes. No.
Yes.
Some yeses, some no's. Mostly yeses, huh? Really? I don't know.
If you feel like it, then do it.
If you feel like it, then do it. But I don't. It would take up too much of my time. Okay, then don't do it. I have a flip phone. I left it in behind it. But
Do you use Facebook?
I don't Facebook either. No. Yeah.
You're not missing much.
I'm not missing much. Okay.
Facebook's
Good.
kind of dead.
That's good to know. Facebook's dead, yeah?
Pretty much.
Wow. Hello.
It's useful for contacting family.
We have one.
We've got somebody standing by here,
Yeah,
and we'll go to you
come have a
next.
seat. Yeah. Hello. How are you? We're going to do this one, I think, first. Is that right?
Let's go to Foxtrot. Go ahead.
I was wondering, when did you kind of realize that you were a good writer, and like how did you like improve your skills to get to where you are now?
Oh, that's an extension of. I don't know if I'm a good writer. Like constantly, like every time I finish a book, I think I'm not going to be able to do it again. But I suppose I realized. In my early 20s, that I wanted to really be a writer, even though I'd understood it as a child. And I had 5 or 6 years of complete and utter failure. But I realized that every time I went to the post box and got a rejection letter, that it just fired me up even more. So I like the virtues of stamina. In a way, a writer has to be like an athlete, because you have to have stamina, you have to have desire, and you have to have perseverance. And there's a toughness, there's a mental toughness that you have to have, because a lot of the time you get kicked around, and and it doesn't work. And this thing that you have inside you, the stories that you have inside you, they don't come out of your fingers. You're typing away, and so you have to fight it. So I think in my early 20s I realized that, but I'm still in the process of trying to become a good writer. And what I mean by that is that I constantly fail, and my books are never as good as I really want them to be. And I like that idea. Failure to me is vivifying. And my favorite quote for my students is from Samuel Beckett, who says, "No matter, try again, fail better." Yeah. Great, thank you. It's your turn. Hi, what's your name?
I'm Sydney.
Hi, Sydney.
Hi, Paul. All right. My question is, why did you choose to write about George Mitchell, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Transatlantic.
Right. Well, so I was writing about Douglas, and then I knew I wanted Douglas to be relevant to the present, because I wanted to say that Douglas is really alive now. And in fact, everybody who's been alive, even your grandparents, and your great grandparents, are alive in this particular moment, because you're alive in this particular moment. So I knew then that here was a statesman going to Ireland at an unusual time. I also knew that one of the most important stories to write about Ireland right now is about peace, because one of our great things is that we have a peace process, and so many people have been killed over the years, and so who was the person who helped us institute our peace process? Another American statesman who goes over to Ireland and spends his time and makes a series of transatlantic journeys back and forth. And he's a magnificent one of the great politicians of our time. And actually, he's not. A lot of people think he's Irish American. He's more Lebanese than he is Irish. So his mother was Lebanese, and his father was raised. It was Irish American, but raised by a Lebanese family, which is really fascinating background to me. And I think sometimes you just got to tell those sort of stories. So, and he is one of the great politicians of our time. Do you like him?
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Good. All right. Great.
I'm gonna go.
Thank you so much.
And because you're in Pittsburgh, we have to talk sports at some point, apparently. And there's a question about who's your favorite soccer team.
Oh.
And I'll piggyback
Great.
on that, too, because I've heard that you're a Steelers fan, if you want to talk. Not that you have to pander to the soccer team.
No, I'm not a Steelers fan. I'm a Stillers fan.
There you go.
There it is. I heard that. I'll tell you why I'm a Steelers fan. Because many years ago, the Rooney family, who were here, as you all know, saved my writing life. Because they gave me an award called the Rooney Award for Irish Literature, and a sum of money which enabled me to go off and write another book. It was for my first collection of short stories. So Dan Rooney and his family have this award for Irish literature that changes the lives of people who are around. So by default, I became a Steelers fan. Then I have a few friends who are down in Austin, Texas, who are from Pittsburgh, and they were rabid Steelers fans. Rabid. It's like, and everything was around the Steelers. So I sort of always looked out for the Steelers. In terms of soccer, I'm going to shock you all by saying that if you know anything about the English Premier League, my favourite team is Stoke City. And people will be like, what? How come you, like, supporting Stoke City is like, I don't know what the equivalent in American football would be, but maybe Carolina Panthers or something, I don't know. But the reason I support Stoke City is because I support them since I was 4 years old, and they had the best goalkeepers in Gordon Banks and Peter Shilton, and my father had been a goalkeeper. So I sort of became a fan of Stoke. That's fun. I never get asked that question. I love coming to schools because sometimes you get those questions, and they actually tie into your writing life. I will tell you that as a kid, one of the things I used to do was I'd go into my bedroom and I would become Gordon Banks for the next game, and I'd play out. I'd throw the ball against the wall, and I'd play out this whole fantasy about what was going to happen in the next soccer match. And maybe that's part of the imagination. Maybe every kid does that, do they? Yeah.
I used to pretend I was Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Obi-Wan Kenobi. All right, cool.
These are AP English students.
That's right. We'll have to get J.J. Abrams to come talk to you guys.
Yes, please.
Do we have time for a couple more questions, or we move?
One more from here, one more from Fox Challenge.
Okay.
Fabulous. How about right there?
Hi there.
Hello.
How are you? Nice to meet you. I have a busted hand, so I can't shake with this hand.
Sorry.
No.
I've been noticing through your writing that you sort of have this historical fiction truth in with it, and that it always leaves the reader open to interpretation.
Right.
Is that because of your journalist background, or is that because you don't really give people a definite answer, like giving people a definite answer?
I think a bit of both. Also, I think that we have to be a little bit doubtful of the presented history that gets presented to us, because history is as much a fiction as anything else, because the historians are picking and choosing certain facts to tell you, so part of my project is to say, doubt everything, right? Mm-hmm. If you're going to be smart, doubt everything, and then come up with your own version of events. Because journalists will say it to you one way, fiction writers will say it to you another way, but if you can take it all, and it's almost like taking a great big cup, and then you drink from that cup and you make your own taste out of it. That's the most important thing. So what I do with history is I interweave fiction, but sometimes the fiction is more real than the history itself. And I know that's a bit odd, but I think it's an important thing for us to say. And then I hopefully leave it open to you to interpret. And you make your own history, because after all,